Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to day 2. That's really loud, isn't it? I'm getting a lot of feedback. Let me go over here. Is that better? Yeah, less feedback. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of the Global CCCM Cluster Meeting. I hope you enjoyed the marketplace. We're very excited to have our keynote speakers with us for the next session. So I'd like to encourage everyone who's still in the marketplace to please come through. We don't want to keep our keynote speakers waiting. I'd also like to ask one of the facilitators from each of the breakout rooms to come up to the front. So who facilitated the breakouts yesterday? Tom Stork, I see. Anybody else? One of the facilitators from the sessions yesterday to come to the front? You're delegated or delegating? Okay, so Juan, very good. And yes, thank you, Henry, both of you. Good. Okay. Do we have all of the facilitators from the breakout sessions yesterday? Almost. Okay. So to you, I have one. Let's actually just see what the sessions were. If one of the team could come and help me with slides, that would be great. So, planned relocation, a solution to displacement. Who was on that one? So Juan, our question to you is, from the session yesterday, what was the message, the fundamental message with regard to CCCM and CCCM strategy?
Okay. Yeah. The message is planned relocations are happening and more are going to happen, and CCCM has a role to play, and we need to engage and be active, and I think show the skills and contribution that we can be part of this.
Thank you. So if you're not aware or you feel you could learn more about planned relocation, then I think it's a really good opportunity. It's a good time to get involved in that and try to enhance your knowledge and awareness of that. Tom, what about standards? What happened?
We looked at where we would be in 5 years' time if we have a world without standards or a life without standards, and we agreed it was a scary dystopia and a bleak outlook on life. And so we agreed that, you know, standards is clearly important. Where do we want to be in 5 years' time with a standards-driven approach? And then how do we get there? And how do we get there? We get there through a theory of change, and we began the process of defining the goal and impact that we want to see of standards over the next 5 years.
So does that mean the theory of change needs to be part of the CCCM strategy?
Absolutely, and we would maybe say a CCCM cluster strategy requires a theory of change that needs to be informed through a theory of change for the minimum standards. So we go round and round in a circle, but yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Tom. So a questionnaire on a theory of change will be coming to all of your inboxes very soon. From community-led projects to self-management, Henry.
Okay. We talked about community participation, how to use CLP towards enhancing ownership, the pro tips and enablers. And we think community engagement should be part of the strategy going forward towards a people-centered approach.
Thank you, Henry. And then the localization session.
So we discussed some of the findings that are emerging from the localization research that's been done for the CCCM cluster. I think most of the people there agreed or said that the findings resonate with them and the recommendations as well. I think one of the key things that two key things that came out was, one is around it's good to have collective commitments or ambitions, but you need to have measurable accountability structures around it, particularly linked to localization, but also being very conscious that localization needs to be contextually driven based on the different settings and environments that the clusters are functioning in different countries.
Great, thank you very much. And then energy access through data.
Well, the IOM energy people are not here this morning, so I'll take it. There is nothing we do that doesn't require energy, and that energy should be clean. And we are both manning IOM and UNHCR and all others with expertise on energy, and it is available for all of you in every country mission to request support on this. And the collection of data is clearly showing. Just to give an example, in the Sudan DTM data collection, it is between 70 and 90% of all the sites that reports to have open fires where you just put firewood between some rocks. It is polluting, and it is less efficient, and it is a protection issue. So to kind of address the energy issues and to include that in their strategies and programming is extremely important these days.
Thank you, Jorn. It's a sobering thought to think you're either helping to solve the problem or you're contributing to the problem. And I don't think anyone is in any action neutral, because as Jorn says, everything we do consumes energy. So MHPSS, Anis.
Thank you, Charlie. In the MHPSS session, we talked about the historical relations between CCCM and MHPSS. And most importantly, we also talked about the way forward, the new resources that exist, in particular the new minimum service package, which for MHPSS, which include key activities per sector, including for CCCM actors. And we said that, yeah, looking forward and looking ahead, it would be nice to have this also reflected in the strategy in terms of capacity building of CCCM actors and partners, because we do contribute to the mental health and the well-being of the population. Guidance when it comes to out-of-camp approaches, also area-based approaches, and how these principles can be expanded to this type of new approaches that we're implementing now. And lastly, that also donors should help us to recognize that CCCM have a role to play on MHPSS and support us going in this direction. Over.
Thank you very much. And then HLP, Jim.
So I think one of the things that's clear is that housing, land and property issues are kind of key. I'm biased and would say that, but it was certainly a view that was shared in the group session that we had. And just want to highlight again, something we talked about was the HLP CCCM toolkit. If you Google those 3 words, you will find it on the CCCM cluster website. We also heard from colleagues from LSE sharing some research into some possibilities for thinking about HLP and durable solutions from a CCCM perspective, looking at the need for more training and thinking about area-based coordination. I think key things that came up in terms of priorities and next steps were around what does it mean to really integrate HLP issues into your work? And so there was a call for, how do we really build that into kind of training, but also those emergency initial responses as well. And also a real call for clarity on roles and responsibilities around HLP issues. I heard that from a lot of different people in the session, but also outside the session. So that might be something good for Juan and Dare and others and us to sit and think about. I think one thing I heard as well was that key for the strategy is how to include HLP more and more.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone. Now, I don't know if we're supposed to give a feedback on the closed door open discussion because it's closed door, right? But Tom, are you there? What can you tell us without being killed afterwards?
It kind of depends how much you pay. No, I mean, clearly it's a closed door session, so I can't tell anyone what happened. But what I would say is it was a reminder of the challenges contradictions, some of the really big issues, some burning issues that aren't going away. But what I would say is that there's some very smart people, and there were some very smart people in that room. And a lot of the discussion really focused on this idea that we have to get this strategy right. And this is a key opportunity, and if it's missed, if it's wasted, we're really kind of facing some problems. But if we get it right the next 5 years, we can start to address some of these underlying burning problems and issues with displacement, with sites, with camps. Yeah.
And if that secrecy doesn't make you want to go to the next closed door open discussion, then I don't know what does, because it's very exciting, very James Bond. Thank you very much to all of you for your sessions, for facilitators, really appreciate it. So just one quick announcement. Can we go back to the previous slide, Elisa? So a couple of people came to us and said, I can't find the session description, or I don't know where the room is. So that QR code will take you to the online agenda. We've checked it this morning to make sure it's all correct. And on each of the sessions, there's the name, but then there's a description as well. So you can access the name of the session, the room, and the description online. What we've also done to try to help is we've put this extra screen at the back. So you'll see there's a screen there with the information on. So you can see it from there too. I hope that's helpful. Next slide, please, Elisa, and then next one again. So here's what we were going to do today, but then you took over, which is great. So when you came in and set up the market just happened like all the best markets in the world. So rather than stop the market and come and give you an orientation session, we thought we'd just let it run. So this is the orientation now. Very shortly we'll start our keynote session, and then we'll be going straight to breakouts. After breakouts, you'll be going to lunch. A couple of people approached me yesterday and said, we really liked the day, but we felt it was a bit rushed. So we're trying to slow it down a little bit today. So we had a good long marketplace, and I hope you had the chance to enjoy that and have a chat with people. We've now got a really good session with keynote and some Q&A. And then we're going to try to extend lunch a little bit. But if you could please come back from lunch at 2 o'clock and come back here, that would be great, because we've got some really exciting breakout sessions for the afternoon. Hope that makes sense. And next slide, please. And then finally, just to remind you, if you have given feedback on any of the individual sessions, thank you so much. It's really helpful for us. If you haven't, but you'd like to, this is the code to give the feedback for the individual sessions. So you can snap it on your phone and keep it open on a browser if you want to do that. So please feel free to do that. And then I think the next thing for me to do is to introduce the keynote session. So I just need to open this. My apologies, it's gone to sleep. So the first thing I'd like to do is to welcome our speaker, Greta Zinder. Greta is from the Office of the UN Secretary General Special Advisor on Solutions to Internal Displacement, and she's coming up on stage with Dare. Welcome, welcome. Please have a seat wherever you like. And very shortly, we will also be welcoming Marina Skuric-Prodanovic, who is the Chief of System-Wide Approaches and Practices in the section in the, Chief of System-Wide Approaches and Practices section in the Coordination Division of OCHA. She was delayed slightly and is parking the car, skidding to a halt right now, and will be running into the room very shortly just for you. So that's how much you guys matter. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this session, I think, with a couple of videos, Elisa. These are videos that were recorded with interviews with displaced persons. The sound quality on the recording was a little bit low, so it's a little quiet at the beginning, but there are closed captions, so you can follow those on the screen. I hope you're able to follow that, and I think that will set the context for this session perfectly, and from there I'll hand over to Dare.
Charlie, thank you. Great. Thank you for being with us here. It's great pleasure. First of all, we will have only 1 hour, but I think this is just a start for further collaboration and engagement among ourselves. CCCM is no stranger to Greta. We had a discussion that day. We were actually even more impressed on the level that you knew about CCCM and the activities. Even some of them were supposed to be still confidential for CCCM, but apparently they have managed to find their ways to you and your knowledge. So thank you for being with us. Now, first, we wanted to hear from the IDPs. So to this extent, and this is something we are trying to encourage more often, is it is actually sometimes surprising to see and to hear and to learn from the displaced communities themselves, but also host communities, local actors, local governments, and the authorities. So we decided, and we were in rush, to have 2 records. They are audio with English translation. These are from informal sites in northern Syria. Once again, we were trying to get more inputs from other sites as well. But these are basically questions to 2 internal displaced persons. We asked them to tell us a little bit of a brief background on who they are, how long they have been there, family composition, etc., and give an idea about their situation as internal displaced persons and what are the needs and how do they, from their perspective, foresee and would potentially design solutions for their situation. Now, this is just, again, not a guided interview. This is just some very open floor for the IDPs in a very short time. But it also shows us that there is a very important piece that we should invest more on, is by having the direct inputs of the internal displaced persons for solutions in particular, because one of the important angles of solutions is ownership. And I think it is extremely important that IDPs own the solution so that it can become durable. Otherwise, it will be a temporary, and sometimes it will also be misfitting and not really much related to the facts and the realities that IDPs foresee their future. So here, I would like to start the videos if we can. I'm trying to make it a bit long until Marina comes, but let's start the videos. Apparently, she's still parking. Eliza, we hope that the voice quality will go, sound quality will be good.
أنا إيمان العيسى نازحة من ريف إدلب، بعيش بمخيم الأكاديمي صار لي 5 سنين. أرملة، عندي 3 أولاد، وأم زوجي كمان عايشة معنا بنفس الخيمة. هالخيمة بتفتقد لأبسط مقومات الحياة. صراحة وقت طلعنا من بيوتنا حسينا بقهر وغصة. قلنا معلش هالحل مؤقت إنه نعيش بخيمة، وعدى علينا شهر وسنة وهلأ صار لي 5 سنين عم بستنى الفرج. وضعي ما بيسمح لي انتقل على مكان أفضل من الخيمة. حلمي بهالحياة أحسن ابعت ولادي على المدرسة ودرسهم. وقت بشوف الولادي اللي عم يحسنوا يدرسوا عم بنقهر كتير على ولادي، وكل يوم بيحلموا يكون عندهم بيت ويروحوا على المدرسة، يروحوا على مدينة ألعاب مثلهم مثل باقي الولاد. بس عم حس حالي عاجزة كتير قدام حلمهم الصغير. بزعل عليهم بس ما بيطلع شي بالإيد. بزعل على أم زوجي يلي ما عم تحسن تاخد العلاج بشكل دائم. المشفى كتير بعيدة عن مخيمنا، كمان المدرسة بعيدة. بتمنى من المجتمع الدولي والإنساني ينقلونا على بيوت أو كرفانات تكون أفضل من هالخيمة يلي وراها قصص وحكايات قهر وحزن ومرض. حاجتنا لازم بقى نعيش نحس حالنا بأمان ونحس بالاستقرار. لازم بقى نخلص من برد الشتاء وشوب الصيف ومن الأمراض اللي اجتنا من ورا عيشتنا بهالخيمة. بتمنى ما بقى أشوف ولا خيمة بالمحرر من قهري معاناتي يلي عشتن بقلبها. نحلم وبنتأمل إنه يحسنوا يأمنوا لنا حياة كريمة.
السلام عليكم، أنا نازح من ريف حماة الشمالي. نزحت باتجاه مخيمات الشمال السوري على الحدود السورية التركية. وحاليا أسكن بمخيم في تجمعات الكرامة، مخيم لأجلكم. طبعا سكننا بخيام من عام 2013، نزحت أنا وعائلتي وما زلت في نفس المخيم. وقت النزحت كان عندي طفلة، هلا عندي 3 بنات و3 أولاد، كلهم أجوا بمخيمات اللجوء. طبعا من سكننا بالمخيم لحد الآن الخدمات سيئة جدا. الخدمات مقدمة للنازحين للاجئين سيئة جدا، كان مياه أو خدمات المياه والوش قليلة جدا، خاصة في فصل الصيف. وبالنسبة للأغذية والأطعمة وهيك كمان دون المستوى المطلوب لكل عائلة. في سلة غذائية عم تقدمها المنظمات، بس لكن كل سنة عم تتناقص الخدمة هي وعم ينقص وزنها. بالنسبة للتعليم الكل بيريد أولاده يتعلموا، ونحن أولادنا أغلب أولاد النازحين ما هم معلمين. أولا لأنه أغلب المدارس عاطلة عن العمل خارج الخدمة. ثاني شيء إن كان في تعليم غير رسمي ما بيعطوا الطلاب العلم اللي بده إياه الطالب. وإذا كان في تعليم رسمي فالكمية محدودة، عدد المقاعد محدودة، فأغلب في كثير طلاب أطفال متسربين من المدرسة. أما على القطاع الصحي ففي مستوصفات، في مشافي، لكن الخدمات فيها ضعيفة شوي. بتمنى تكون أفضل من هيك، خاصة يعني عانينا كثير نحن كنازحين بعد جائحة كورونا والكوليرا وهالأمور هاي، فصار في ازدحام كثير بالمشافي، وصار وصولنا للخدمات يعني شبه معدوم. نحن بنتمنى نرجع على بلادنا لأنه تهجرنا تهجير قسري، لكن ما بنحسن نرجع لحتى تروح أسباب أو مسببات النزوح اللي تعرضنا له لتتلاشى بالكامل. ساعتها فينا نروح نرجع على بلادنا، والكل بيتمنى يرجع، بس لكن بدون هاي المسببات. طبعا الظروف صعبة، ظروف المخيمات من 2013 لحد الآن يعني 9 سنوات نزوح، ظروف صعبة جدا عانينا منها. عانينا من حر الصيف وبرود الشتاء وأطفال صغار، وعندي أطفال رضع. وعانينا من أمراض كتير باعتبار نحن بمخيمات، والتخديم بمنطقة المخيمات ضعيفة جدا جدا، خاصة الصرف الصحي. فبتلاقي المياه الصرف الصحي ماشي على وجه الأرض، على سطح الأرض، والأولاد عم تلعب مياه الصرف وما في مياه لتغسل الأولاد. لذلك صار في أمراض كتير منتشرة مثل حبة السنة، الإشمانيا، حبة حلب، والإسهال. الإسهال هذا بشكل دائم الأولاد يتعرضوا له بشكل يومي باعتبار البيئة ملوثة غير نظيفة أبدا أبدا. ونحن بنتمنى من منظمات المجتمع المدني يحسنوا الخدمات، يفرضوا مشاريع سبل عيش، مشاريع كاش، مشاريع تدر دخل ثابت للنازحين، لأنه النازح بدون دخل ثابت ما عم يحسن يواجه ظروف الحياة وقساوة العيش في مخيمات اللجوء.
Okay, so Marina, welcome. We already introduced you, and you are no stranger to many of us. Thank you for making the time. Thank you for coming here. We just viewed 2 videos that we had with the IDPs, audios actually, but in a video mode, to tell how the affected communities see solutions from their perspectives. With that, if I allow myself, maybe I will hand the floor to you, Greta, to give us a presentation, and maybe after you, I will ask Marina kindly to tell us how does she sees the solution from the intercluster coordination perspective and scope, and then we will open the floor for some questions. Bearing in mind that we have to finish the session by 11:45 maximum, so we will try to take as many as we can, and of course we can always park some questions. So Greta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dare, and hello to everyone. So my name is Greta Zender. Very happy to be here with you. I'm the Senior Policy Advisor and Chief of Staff for the UNSG's Special Advisor on Solutions to Internal Displacement. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about that work and the connection with the CCCM cluster, and looking forward to the discussion. And next slide, please. So maybe just a few words about the framework for my work and hopefully for our work. So last year in June, the Secretary General of the United Nations issued something called the Action Agenda on Internal Displacement. And this action agenda is it's the first time really we have a UN document which looks across the humanitarian development and peace nexus at what the UN can do, but also partners and of course governments, but also civil society organizations for a better approach to internal displacement. And the reason the SG actually did this action agenda is before that he had a high-level panel on internal displacement which gave him a range of recommendations and saying, you know, business as usual when it comes to internal displacement is not good enough. We really have to step up our efforts, whether it's to prevent displacement crises, whether it's to assist and protect IDPs, and also to provide solutions. And it's not to say that what we have been doing over the years for IDPs has not been important, because I think there have been enormous progress and the SG recognized that. But still, we have to up our game. And so the SG's action agenda gives us a framework for that on these three areas: prevention, assistance and protection, and then solutions. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Can you just go back? Yeah. So as part of the SG's action agenda, one measure is to have a special advisor on solutions to internal displacement. So this is actually the office I am part of. And the reason there is a special advisor, it's because it's seen that in the system, there's many agencies and organizations working on internal displacement, but we need to really have a more coherent approach. And so to have this catalyst, to have a person kind of bringing everyone together, speaking with governments, you know, engaging at the highest level, governments on solutions, mobilizing the UN system, especially the development system, because the humanitarian system, I mean, you are already so engaged on internal displacement, that's not a question. But when we look at development to hand over, where is development? So that's part of this action agenda, is to also bring in development actors and also international financial institutions like the World Bank. And really to work better across these three pillars: humanitarian, development, and peace, because they all have a role to bring about solutions to internal displacement. Next slide, please. So as part of our work with the special advisor, to not just keep it theoretical, but rather very, very practical, we have worked with UN resident coordinators, which are often also, of course, HCs, as well as UN agencies and governments, to see where solutions may be possible. Because it's not everywhere that solutions are truly possible. When we hear the testimony of the Syrian IDPs who just shared their life with us, what we see is that they're not in a situation where solutions are possible. We can't talk about a government-led approach to solutions in northwest Syria. We can't have the development actors to be like supporting the government and really enable solutions together with IDPs in such a context. So where are the contexts which are possible, where we have government leadership, where UN partners have identified and others have identified really together with IDPs places and people where it's possible to support solutions and where the development actors are behind. So we have identified those 16 countries, and you will see that some of them already things have not gone so well. If we take the example of Sudan, this is very much on pause. And this is the reason we have 16 countries, is because we can't imagine that we'll be successful everywhere. But at least we have to try. And so the idea is in those countries to work with national governments, to work with UN agencies and partners, and to support IDPs, at least those, you know, a significant portion of them, to have solutions, meaning that there's strategy in place, there's the coordination system between the UN, governments, and partners, that there is financing behind it, which is not just humanitarian financing, but development financing. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to speak more in the Q&A about what we do, but I want to keep it short to be able to have a discussion. So this slide shows you some of the commitments which are in the action agenda and possible questions and implications for the CCM cluster, especially as you think about the new strategy of your cluster. The first one is, again, in a situation like Syria, or northwest Syria, let's say, what can we do to at least support solutions, or to initiate solutions, to ensure that when the person who was giving us the testimony and saying, you know, how can we ensure access to education? How can I have access to livelihood? What is it that we can do as part of the CCM cluster, whether to actually enable that? And it's very much in line with the current ISC review on internal displacement situations, which maybe you have discussed, and which is also looking at this, which is also one of the strong aspects of this review, is how do we better link up with solutions? What are the elements which we can have to enable that? And I think it's an important question because it's a bit of a debate, right, in the humanitarian sphere, like how just humanitarian are we? How are we enabling already solutions or development action? Are we overstretching ourselves? Where are the development actors? So it really, I think, opens quite a range of questions. The second point I wanted to discuss, thought it would be interesting to discuss, is really, I think in the humanitarian community, there have been such strong efforts when it comes to accountability to affected communities. I know earlier you had a really interesting session on localization and really what it means in practice. But when it comes to solutions, I don't think there have been such systematic efforts to include IDPs in solutions. And I think you have a lot to bring to that discussion based on your experience. And so I think it's an important point. Number 3 is, we know that states have the primary responsibility to address the needs of their residents, protection needs, assistance needs of their residents and citizens, including IDPs. But in situations which are so fraught, where maybe, you know, some of the governments are even part of the conflict, as we have seen, how do we shift to this solutions approach? What are the criteria? How do we have this government-led approach? Government-led development-supported approach. How do we address the remaining protection risks when we shift to that solutions approach? We can take the example of Iraq. With the closing of the clusters, we still have a protection working group, some type of protection working group, which has remained because we see the issue. Number 4, I know that the CCM cluster has done so much when it comes to urban issues, or like urban response, working through an area-based approach. And this is so important because when we think about internal displacement situations, the majority are in urban settings, in informal settlements, in poor urban areas. And many of these IDPs, they're never going to return home. So what can we do to enable their integrations? And it starts with you. It starts with having the CCM cluster have this approach which enable local integration and which has those discussions, both with the communities, with the local authorities, preparing them. And we can think of the youth in particular, people who are basically born in those displacement situations. It's very likely they would stay where they are. And finally, I know you had a few discussions already on data and the importance of collecting and managing data on internal displacement. And here, when we shift to solutions, we again look at governments as the primary data producer and collector and analyst. But how do we support that? How do we make sure that the protection issues we see are guaranteed? And again, so the CCM cluster, I think, has a lot to bring in that. Thank you so much, Dana.
Great, thank you very much. It's actually also impressive how you managed to bring such a large topic into few presentation and made them very relevant for us as CCCM actors here. We will go for later for a round of questions, so prepare your questions. But before that, I would like to hand the floor to Marina to tell us how does that work from inter-cluster cross-clusteral coordination scope. Marina.
Thank you, Der. Pleasure to be here. I'm not going to repeat what Greta has already said. She said it much better, but just to say that, of course, one of the key things that we do as OCHA is also support the role of the Special Advisor on Solutions to Internal Displacement. For those of you who may not have read our strategic plan as your bedtime reading, maybe I'd like to just maybe point out 5 key things that OCHA has set out to do. And of course, the key part of that is OCHA's role in intercluster coordination. So the first is advocacy. So as OCHA, we're committing that for the coming years, we will advocate for durable solutions consistently at global level and obviously at country level, and leveraging the role of the emergency relief coordinator to advocate and mobilize for collective action and also financing for durable solutions. The second is in our role of steering the humanitarian programming cycle. Obviously, we will continue to be the custodian of this function, but the humanitarian program cycle is really the critical part where we can actually ensure that humanitarian responses really consistently integrate across all sectors, all clusters, where there may be clusters, the groundwork for durable solutions. If it's not in the humanitarian program cycle, it won't happen. So part of it is also linking all these different sectoral interventions and helping that joint planning, ensuring that there is consistency, and obviously durable solutions are integrated, but obviously that we always have an outlook for the needs of displaced people and responses to them. The third is to ensure the complementarity between humanitarian development and peace interventions and those that require solutions, and both in our role of facilitating and supporting HCs in the HCT, but also when there is no more HCT, if there is a humanitarian advisory team on the ground where OCHA continues to support the RCO function in this. The fourth is to really look at the coordination of durable solutions at that intercluster coordination level, which is, again, to me, this is the center hold. If the intercluster coordination or the intersectoral coordination does not work, it's really hard to have that integrated response. And then finally, good practices. I think we've committed to helping disseminate good practices, knowledge, guidance, and training. For example, more recently, in our role of also facilitating the work of the Global Cluster Coordination Group, as you may have heard from Der in previous sessions, there was this lessons learned on Iraq, and it was clear that there were issues in terms of transition and issues in terms of how durable solutions would then pan out. So obviously what we would like to do is learn from practices, not necessarily only good practices, but also perhaps poor practices, and ensure that in the future this is really integrated. And for example, from the Iraq example, we had some very specific issues which also relate to durable solutions, which will need to be taken at that sort of global coordination level. So that's it in a nutshell. I'm not going to go on longer, but I'm very happy to take questions, and I think it's much more interesting when we actually have a discussion rather than you listening to me for too long. Over to you.
No, that's fine. It works. Don't worry. Technologies always have their hiccups. Good. So now we are distributing these mics. Please feel free to raise your hands, and it will be really useful if you mention whether the questions are addressed to Greta or to Marina. Marina, this was again also telling that we are trying to break the silos as we discuss about solutions, because it's really important from intercluster perspective, OCHA agencies, organizations membership to work together and jointly. Otherwise, we will be missing lots of pieces of this mosaic. I don't see hands raised. I will keep talking until I see a hand raised. Here we have one hand raised, so I will stop talking. The floor is yours. Take the mic, please, and ask your question, or if you have an intervention. And please, also, it would be useful if you could, rightly said, introduce yourself and your organization and which operation you are coming from.
Okay. Hi. I don't know if this, oh yeah, it's working. My name is Majdalina. I work with ACTED, but I also play the role of the CCCM cluster co-lead along with Justine in Burkina Faso. So I will also let Justine add if there's anything on this point. My question and comment is, how were the countries selected? Are you open to suggestions? And I'm thinking of that because we don't have the data yet. We're waiting for the MSNA, but we have observed that IDPs in Burkina Faso are planning their displacement or are preventively moving before things reach their home. And some of them are buying land, constructing houses, and on the other hand, host communities are providing subsidized prices for these lands. So there's quite an effort that's already ongoing, which we're trying to put numbers on in the upcoming multi-sectoral needs assessment. So this is really the idea I have in mind, is the contingency plans that people have, the solutions that people already have, and it's kind of a unique context for me where for me it's the first time that I see IDPs buying land in a displacement context, and this sort of support. I accidentally learned about that. I was not even asking. That's my question and comment. I don't know if Justine wants to add something.
Let's take another question, or let's go to Justine.
Merci. I will talk in French. J'allais compléter aussi pour dire que c'est vrai qu'il y a beaucoup d'initiatives au niveau des communautés, mais pour le cluster CCCM au Burkina Faso, c'est de savoir aussi, on nous dit que nous sommes porte d'entrée pour l'assistance et la protection, mais quand il s'agit de donner des fonds, le CCCM est toujours en dernière position. Donc, il faudra aussi que, j'ai écouté le discours de madame, il ne faudrait pas que ce soit au niveau de Genève que ça se dise, mais il faudrait que sur le terrain, on ressente ça. Il faut que le CCCM soit partie prenante de tous les financements et qu'on sente véritablement que nous sommes en train de jouer notre rôle. Sinon, on va se retrouver ici l'année prochaine avec les mêmes difficultés et les mêmes discours. Donc, aidez-nous à faire notre travail sur le terrain. C'est vraiment un plaidoyer que nous faisons. Merci.
This is a different question. My name is Richard, CCCM Cluster Coordinator from Mozambique. And my question is to OCHA. Recently, I saw OCHA ambitious strategy. I think it's a 5-year strategy, particularly looking at the durable solution, the role that OCHA want to play in seeking the durable solutions for the IDPs. And what came into my mind with CCCM will be duplicating the same role with OCHA, or there is going to be a distinction between what CCCM will be doing in an attempt to enable the IDPs and working with the national authority. I'm also aware that OCHA also works very closely with the national authority, and CCCM by nature, one of our triple Cs has the national authority responsibility in seeking durable solution. So my question is the duplication of effort, or whether that strategy is going to make it clear this is where OCHA starts and ends, and this is where CCCM continues from. Thank you.
I think we have one more here in the middle. We'll go with this one.
Thank you. My name is Jenny. I'm from UNHCR from Myanmar operation. In terms of IDP solutions, my question is there or could there be any possibility of solutions without the national authorities or alternative authorities?
Would you like more questions, or are you ready to answer, do you think?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Moi, je dois poser ma question en français. Je me présente, moi, c'est Mohamed Saleh Seïd, co-lead du CCM Cluster. Je viens du Tchad, c'est la délégation du Tchad. Et merci pour la présentation de Madame Greta, que nous avons bien noté, tout ce qui est relatif à la stratégie. Et ma question qui se pose, parce que dans l'exercice d'hier, on s'est dit, bon, il fallait vraiment chercher à pouvoir au moins se dégager une stratégie pour 5 ans. Mais or, dans sa présentation, il y a déjà la nouvelle stratégie du CCM. En tenant compte de tout ce qui est plan d'action du secrétaire général des Nations Unies, étant donné que c'est basé sur 3 objectifs, est-ce cette stratégie que vous avez présentée, n'est-ce pas, prend en considération toute la dimension avec ce que nous cherchons avec l'exercice d'hier pour les 5 années à venir, de prendre, d'intégrer aussi ce plan d'action du secrétaire général des Nations Unies. Ma deuxième question relativement aux solutions durables. Y a-t-il des exemples, puisque dans le cadre de la relocalisation, puisque étant donné que nous savons qu'il y a un problème, n'est-ce pas, qui se pose dans le cadre d'identification des sites. Et donc, il y a ce problème qui se pose dans la mesure où, avec le gouvernement, tout ce qui est CCM et les acteurs humanitaires, n'est-ce pas, au niveau de mon pays, nous n'avons pas vraiment pu, au moins jusqu'à présent, identifier des sites raisonnables, puisque étant donné que la zone, si vous savez, la zone du lac Tchad est frontalière avec le Nigeria, le Niger, et tout ce qui est relatif avec la problématique de la secte terroriste, n'est-ce pas, qui sévit dans la zone. Et donc, il y a cette problématique de pouvoir relocaliser les IDPs à l'intérieur du territoire pour permettre vraiment d'assurer leur sécurité permanente. Il y a aussi ce problème, n'est-ce pas, bon, qui se pose dans le cadre, n'est-ce pas, de l'appropriation, ou que ce soit des chiffres. Les chiffres que nous avons, que nous disposons actuellement, n'ont pas été mis à jour, puisque, étant donné qu'on parle de 381 000 personnes déplacées internes, et là, c'est depuis 2014. Au niveau de la Commission nationale d'accueil dont je travaille en tant que chargé des opérations et du cluster, et donc, nous avons mis, n'est-ce pas, en ligne un projet dans le cadre, n'est-ce pas, de pouvoir au moins mettre en place un système d'enregistrement biométrique de toutes les personnes IDPs. Et depuis janvier jusqu'à là, on n'a pas eu quand même des échos par rapport à tous ceux qui peuvent nous aider dans ce cadre. Donc, je fais ce plaidoyer pour nous permettre quand même d'avoir, n'est-ce pas, cet aspect-là, d'avoir ce financement, pouvoir nous permettre de mettre en place un système d'enregistrement biométrique, puisque déjà le Tchad vient d'adopter, n'est-ce pas, une loi de protection des personnes déplacées internes, c'était le 24 mai 2023, et ça prend en dimension non seulement que la protection, ainsi de suite, toute cette partie, et vous savez que la partie enregistrement biométrique, les chiffres, permettent quand même d'avoir une très bonne planification. Voilà ce que je voulais au moins partager et tout de même savoir un peu de réponse par rapport à la présentation de Madame Greta. Merci.
We have simultaneous translation, so colleagues will get the translation. So you don't need to use 2 languages. If you want to respond in French, it's up to you. Really feel free. But then we just have to shift the probably.
Whatever is easier for you.
I think if it's easier, maybe wait till you can answer in English, and then it's simultaneously translated into French. If the colleagues are in agreement, is that okay? So there is a translation. So please take the floor, and then we will go for the other round of questions.
Ok, merci beaucoup pour les questions. Donc je vais répondre aux questions de Magdalena et aussi de Jenny et de Mohamed. Pour Magdalena, concernant le Burkina... Oh, so sorry. I forgot I have to speak in English. I did the opposite.
That's how automatic it is. Yes, exactly.
So sorry. So I'm going to respond to the question of Magdalena. Jenny and Mohammed. For Magdalena, I think it's super interesting to hear about this practice in Burkina Faso. The way we looked at the countries, last summer we had discussions with 35 RCs and country teams to identify the countries and then discuss with governments. And so Burkina Faso was indeed one of the 35 countries. But then what we saw is that, at least at the time, the focus was really much more on humanitarian response. And it wasn't felt that there was so much space at the time to have such a strong focus on solutions given the instability. But I think, you know, what we see is that things shift over time, and countries which were selected a year ago are now in a much more complex maybe situations than Burkina Faso. So what I would say, it's hard maybe to reopen. We already have 16 countries, but what is true is that the action agenda is actually for all the countries experiencing internal displacement. And it's so good to hear that there's this good practices, and maybe there you can share also my email, and I would love to hear from these practices and really have them so that we can share them further. So really thank you for sharing that. When it comes to Jenny's, I think really important question on Myanmar, whether we can foster solutions to internal displacement in the absence of, you know, political willingness, let's say, of national authorities. And I think we have this challenge in quite a few countries, and Myanmar, of course, is one of them. You will see that, you may have seen on our list of countries, we have Afghanistan, where the UN can't really work with the de facto authorities, at least in a recognized way. So we have this challenge as well, and this is the reason we included Afghanistan, is because we want to see then, if it's not possible to work in a very systematized way with national authorities on solutions, what can we do at least the local level and really foster that? And for sure, like at the small scale solutions, people will find their own solutions, and we have many examples of small projects with solutions. But what we're saying overall is so much better to be able to involve national authorities and even have national authorities in the lead, because we need to scale up solutions. We need to have laws enabling solutions to internal displacement. There's often housing, land, and property issues, there are voting issues, there are transitional justice issues. I mean, all this requires really the involvement of national governments, and without that, it's very hard to have large-scale solutions. And maybe finally, on Mohammed's comments and question, also just to mention that the action agenda is available in French, and also in Arabic, in Russian, in Spanish, in Chinese, so in all the UN languages, if you want to have a look as well. And I think I don't know if it's so much a question for me, to what extent does the new CCCM strategy actually include or take into account the action agenda on internal displacement? My hope is that it will. You know, maybe it's more of a question for Dare and colleagues to see how really we can take up the action agenda in this. And well noted, Mohammed, on the issues of the complexities of relocation, of IDPs in Chad, and the importance of data and getting good data. The only thing I can't say we have financing for data in Chad, but the good news is that we have, as part of the action agenda implementation, a data working group which will accompany the 16 countries. So I think maybe we can look at that. We can look at Chad and try to see how to accompany a better data system, at least linked to solutions. Thank you, and over to Marina for the other questions.
Great. À la dame qui a posé la question, the lady who asked the question, sur la mobilisation des ressources, je ne suis pas sûre, en fait, je ne connais pas les statistiques pour Burkina Faso, donc je ne sais pas si c'est CCCM, so I don't know the statistics for Burkina Faso. I don't know whether it's CCCM that is the lowest funded. Pour beaucoup des parties du monde, c'est en fait protection. For a lot of parts of the world, it's protection. Qui est normalement le secteur qui est le moins financé, which is the sector that's the least financed. But si c'est vraiment le cas, if it's really the case, je suggère que en fait oui, c'est OCHA qui doit faire l'advocacy pour la mobilisation des ressources, mais c'est aussi la cluster lead agency, it's also the cluster lead agency, et c'est aussi le HC, le coordinateur humanitaire. It's also, the HC plays a very important role. Donc il y a un rôle très, elle ou il a un rôle très important. Et donc, de mon côté, c'est la priorisation est faite au niveau de pays. So the prioritization is really done at the country level. Et en fait, OCHA joue un rôle très important. So OCHA plays a very important role en fait de soutenir tous les secteurs. On inclut CCCM. Peut-être c'est pas le cas. On peut parler peut-être après pendant le café. Maybe that's not the case. I'm happy to speak after. Mais définitivement, c'est ce qui devrait se passer. Definitely, that's what should be happening. To the question of Mozambique, so I'm glad you think it's an ambitious strategy. I think it's ambitious, but I think it's nothing particularly earth-shattering in the sense that we've been doing this already. We have been supporting durable solutions, but I think what it does do is it frames it in a very concrete way and ties it to our 5 key functions. I don't see anything in the strategic plan that makes it look like we are taking away the role of CCCM or trying to supplant it. But I'd be very eager to hear how you see that, and maybe that just requires a follow-up discussion. We have always been the custodian of the HPC, so nothing's changed there. We're there to support the HPC. And don't forget, we are not a programming entity, right? OCHA does not program. We don't run programs. We don't run camps. We don't do cash. The only thing we do is facilitate its coordination. And certainly, I think this advocacy around the complementarity, I see it very much in alignment with our role of supporting the HC. And certainly, if there are touch points, I think there are clear touch points where OCHA does have a certain comparative advantage in the sense that it facilitates the work of HCTs by supporting the HCs. It facilitates the HPC. But the content all comes from you. It doesn't come from us. We don't run the content. But I'd be eager to hear why is there such overlap, and perhaps there is space and there is a need to clarify certain things a bit more if you feel there is an overlap, because ultimately there shouldn't be, right? We should be there underpinning what you do, not supplanting it in any way. Back to you, Doug.
Thank you, Greta and Marina. Colleagues, interpreters, as you can see, also Marina has a future with you by being able to do a very quick simultaneous translation and shift between the languages. Good answers. Now I think we just can go to the second round of the questions and the answers, minding the time.
Thank you. My name is Yagzan Shishakli. I work for a local NGO in Turkey and Syria, and I managed one of the largest IDP camps in Syria. My question, I'm looking at the plan and to the panel. I don't see the private business coordination. And I think private business now with the big companies, it's so important to be included. Especially after Corona, we learned we all can be in our home, and probably in our tent, and do our work. And I don't see this in as large as it should be. And this is give a lot of power to the local communities. We don't really have to go to the local communities and give them a cow to milk and stay in their camps. But we can take the local community and give them access to work with New York, Geneva, and other capitals. I think instead of doing localization this way, we take them to globalization the other way. And what's your comment? Thank you.
Okay, I take it. Yeah. Okay, good morning to all of you. My name is Vincent. I'm the CCCM coordinator in Afghanistan. Thank you so much, Greta, for your comment on Afghanistan. It's indeed a very complex and challenging and probably unique situation with the de facto authorities. I would like to maybe share one observation. We have a lot of IDPs in Afghanistan. The de facto, since the fall of Kabul, have basically one goal, is to see the IDP to return in their place of origin. This is one of the third option that we have. So today, CCCM is a working group in Afghanistan. We do have also the durable solution working group. Maybe one observation is that in the HRP, even in the revision of the HRP, which just happened, we do not have necessarily a very high visibility compared to other clusters, which is a shame. But this is how it is. So I think we need to develop more advocacy document towards especially donors to really explain the situation and what will be or what could be needed. But my personal observation, and I think it's one of the topic of this three days workshop, is the link between CCCM and durable solution. It's crucial and critical. And if we do not have it, we fail. And if we look at the situation today in Afghanistan, we know that the de facto, in one way or another, they will succeed. They trap us, let's say it. We have no weapon, obviously. We have very limited fund. We have just the kindness and the politeness to really beg to work with them. It's very difficult, and we know all the issue with the ban on women these days. But say that, when we try to prevent eviction, at the humanitarian level, at the cluster level, we may succeed and we may help people to return in the adequate and dignified way back to their place of choice. But, and this is where the big but is, if we do not have developing partners on board with us from day one, we fail. And we are creating new IDPs in the coming months. I will take one case in Afghanistan when probably you know about it, Herat, during the winter time, and it's very harsh in Afghanistan, we had to move and assist 20,000 people. At the humanitarian level, we did it. We find a way to assist them. Now it's 6 months ago. Now in my scale, we are in the medium term. And this is where developing partner and humanitarian should be still on board, on the site, to work together to prevent new cases of IDPs. And this is where we are today in Afghanistan. Very challenging, and developing partners, I mean, in the working group, we have UNDP, UNICEF, IOM, UNHCR. Great, but not enough. So we have to be very careful about what we do, because we are, at the end, if we are not together, we are creating new IDPs. So I really would like to alert you on this aspect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Please allow me to try in English. If not, I will speak my franglais. Yes, it is about nurses. My name is Bakbo. I'm from Central Africa Republic Operation. I'm the CCCM coordinator. My intervention is about the nurses, humanitarian development and peace. The question is not directly from me. It's from our various working groups. Why are we talking about humanitarian development and peace? Colleagues and I are asking why we cannot put peace first. Peace, humanitarian, and development. Because what we are observing, before coming to Central African Republic, I was in Congo Democratic. The problem is that humanitarian organizations are always failing to access to the beneficiaries, because what is on the ground is the internal conflict among communities. We cannot access communities and then implement our humanitarian activities. Therefore, no development, no peace. But we are thinking that if we put peace first and we manage to invest in peace activities, therefore, when communities are calm, we can go and do development, humanitarian activities to kick off development. And therefore, we will have everything stable. So why are we putting peace at the last position and then put humanitarian for which we are failing to implement activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we'll go for the last question, if this is okay.
Ok, je vais poser ma question en français. Je m'appelle Marcelin Kouakou. Je suis coordonnateur gestion des sites pour le Sahel au Burkina Faso pour le compte de l'ONG NRC. C'est concernant donc le point 5 de la stratégie qui a été présentée. Je ne sais pas si j'ai très bien compris ce qui a été dit, mais je voudrais parler donc de la collecte des données sur la fiabilité des chiffres. On sait que toute la planification humanitaire se base sur les données, les chiffres. Est-ce que les différents conférenciers peuvent nous partager leur expérience en prenant en compte les mouvements pendulaires des PDI ou même des réfugiés? Merci.
Thank you. Well, one raised her hands, and I cannot say no to the global CCCM coordinator from.
Hashtag abuse of power.
She's my better professional part, basically.
It is definitely an abuse of power to fit in one more question. And maybe to come at it from a slightly different angle. And thank you, Greta and Marina, for joining us. Some of our concerns is that a lot of the discussion around solutions is also being justification for some forced eviction and forced returns. And I think displacement by itself is not a negative thing. It's a coping mechanism to what happens, right? I think the problem comes when we're not looking at displacement as a whole. And I think at the same time, we cannot look at solutions as a standalone entity either. So, you know, my advocacy often is that we do not support formation of camps, right? As many times as we have the word camp in our cluster name. But I think it's also for us to advocate and make sure that any form of solutions that happen is done, you know, in a dignified, safe, and voluntary manner. And sometimes I worry that in a lot of contexts we're working in, more and more we're hearing about forced closure of camps with no notice, and sometimes they're done in the name of solutions. So, you know, that's my big question back to you. Thank you.
Great. Now, we are finding ourselves in a little bit of critical situation because I see at least 4 hands raised. I know that at least, Greta, you have to really leave to join another meeting very soon. So my suggestion is, I mean, I don't know how long you can stay, but also I don't want to upset Charlie. Charlie is also very strict about these things. No, 5 minutes and that's it. So may I stop here? We will discuss over lunch the rest of the things. I will be happy to have another set of discussion later on with Greta. We can have a webinar in the future if needed, if necessary. Happy to do this at any time in the future. It seems that there's a lot of appetite, but allow me now to stop with the questions, give the floor back to Greta and Marina, and then we will take it further from there. Greta.
So let me start with Turkey and Syria. First of all, you're really speaking to a converted in the private sector. So in one of my past lives, I actually did a lot of private sector engagement. So I have 3 things to say to you. Absolutely agree. You will notice the ISC localization strategy, localization of coordination, when it defines local actors, actually makes it very clear that it involves local NGOs, local authorities, local government officials, and so on. So local actors is a very wide category, and local private sector, recognizing that not all private sector is a humanitarian actor, but there are still a lot of people who don't believe the private sector belongs in humanitarian action. I actually tend to think otherwise. But certainly I think the private sector has proved its added value, not just in terms of giving resources, but also being a very active participant. Ebola was one case and so on. So I could, if you give me my soapbox, I could be on this for an hour. So first of all, I agree. Second of all, we do recognize this in ISC guidance. Third of all, it's an objective fact that the private sector is actually not a very active participant in various coordination bodies. So we actually track this, and we know that, you know, there used to be, for example, 2 HCTs when the private sector used to be present, and it's fallen down to 1 over the years. Now, of course, there's the less visible ones in terms of cluster membership and so on. So I would just say that from your cluster position, if you have an advocate to say, yes, you should engage the private sector, I'm it. OCHA actually does run something called the Connecting Business Initiative, which is a set of networks of private sector organizations, and it's got networks, I think it's 18 countries. There's one in Turkey, but there isn't one for Syria. And, you know, setting up these networks is not straightforward, right? It's also a complex operation. It takes place over years. I would just say that one is, do keep up the conversation even when you don't have them as an active participant. And I think what we do also is we encourage HCs to engage with the private sector. Increasingly, I think HCs are recognizing that key role. And 2, you know, if your criteria for cluster membership don't preclude it, include them and let them be your key counterpart. They will bring added value. They will bring knowledge, know-how, all sorts of insights that you will not have. But be warned, they also have very little patience for our processes, right? So they see us as often very inefficient, using terminology they don't like, talking a lot in circles and not getting to the action. So you need to also be able to interact with them. So that's on the private sector. On the gentleman who was raising the point of Afghanistan, I can just say I completely agree. I haven't been to Afghanistan for at least 3 years. But I remember when we went, there was exactly that whole issue of, you know, how do you provide solutions? Displacement is okay for a few months, and then after a few months you become a burden, and there's this whole medium to long term. I honestly don't know what the solution is for Afghanistan at this point, when you don't have that take-up from development actors. And what I experienced was before the Taliban came to power, right? I think the political landscape of Afghanistan has changed so significantly. When I was there, everyone was saying we don't need humanitarian anymore, we need to get into development. Afghanistan is a success story. 3 years later, the narrative has completely flipped around. And while even in that other narrative where it was lauded as a success story, both in terms of elections, but also in terms of, you know, it was on its good way in terms of development, even then durable solutions was difficult, and that proper interaction was still lacking. I think now it's a real uphill struggle. I'm sorry, I don't have an answer, but I can just say I completely agree, and yes, there are dangers. And then also to agree with one on the durable solutions and not it being an excuse for false evictions. I think the reason we are all coordinators, and you are a very important body of coordinators, is that we navigate political issues such as that. We don't just coordinate technical issues. You're not just there because of your technical skills. You're also there because of your political navigation abilities, and making sure that we're politically savvy, we don't get caught onto it. To the gentleman from CAR, peace development, humanitarian development, I agree. But you know, it's not as simple as that, as we know, and often we know that humanitarian is a panacea for peace, and while peace should come first, it doesn't all come in a nice, neat arrangement. Et finalement, j'ai pas exactement compris la question, mais peut-être quelqu'un d'autre a compris. I didn't quite understand the question on the collection of data. Was that a question to OCHA? C'était une question pour OCHA ou c'était une question pour Greta?
Demandais, est-ce que les mouvements pendulaires sont pris en compte dans la collecte des données en termes de chiffres pour les PDI ou bien pour les réfugiés?
Ok, merci. C'est Greta qui va répondre. Toutes les questions difficiles sont Greta.
Thank you so much, everyone, and Marina. Maybe just an addition for Vincent. If I understand correctly, I think there is a new national strategy from the Taliban on solutions, which really just focuses on return So I do think this really shows this exclusive focus on return, and the importance for maybe the RCHC and others to really see what space there is to consider local integration, lease and resettlement. So on the question from Marcelin on the population movement, I think you've really put your finger on something really, really difficult, because the pendular movement means that people will either they go back to their maybe homes of origin because they still have access to the field because they have no other choice, and they go back, and it is something very hard, I think, to measure, because usually the way internal displacement and also refugee, I think for refugees is maybe different, but at least for internal displacement, you get snapshots of a situation, for example, through the DTM. So you will have at certain point in time whoever is displaced, and not really this pendulum movement. So I think it is a very important point. And maybe finally on the comment from Juan, I think, I mean, for sure, like you said, displacement is not a bad thing. It is a coping mechanism. For sure, it's a coping mechanism. I would still say that it's always a bad thing. What is very important, though, is that we don't prevent people to be able to be displaced, but also that it's important for displacement to be as short as possible, in line with international standards. And I think that's when this in line with international standards is so important. So closing a camp, for sure, as we've seen, for sure, it's really not a solution. And I think we should really have better messages and consistent messages across operations on this issue. So thank you so much, and back to you, dear.
Marina, Greta, colleagues, thank you. This was excellent brainstorming on solutions and the CCCM. Just some conclusion remarks from my side first. CCCM considers itself as a basis for solutions. The number of IDPs in size is terrific. The living conditions are extremely difficult and bad. Aid dependency increasing over the years. Not the numbers are all increasing, because we have to be also careful, because we accept that the number of IDPs are increasing, but actually the portion of IDPs moving to size is increasing. This is a scary benchmark for us to see, because the solution is not staying the same way, but actually it's even getting less and less available for the population. So that's why we consider ourselves in the heart of it, but not only from return perspective, from the very early perspective of displacement, knowing who those people are, what their intentions are, how can we take part in this, how can we involve different actors in that one. So we do, and our strategy does take this as a centrality of the way forward for the different actors. So yes, and we would like to work together more on this one. We do need some clarity and unpacking on how to engage with the development actors. We have plenty of examples, but we hear sometimes you have to engage with the development actors and also the private sector. We hear this a lot. We need some more unpacking. Because if they are not there, what can we do? If the World Bank and the others are not coming, what can we do? If even us as UN agencies, we are working in silos, what can we do about that one? We have many good examples as CCCM on incorporating solutions from the start. And we have also some bad examples. We have bad examples in creating aid dependency, sometimes also from the donor's perspective, and we have donors sitting here, where we get the donors say that, why don't you do solutions? And we say, well, if all the funds you are giving us is for pure life-saving activities, it's very difficult for the cluster coordinators to incorporate solutions. And the NGOs say, sometimes it makes no sense for you to come to tell me to do something in long term, while I have only access for life-saving activities. Coming back to the conclusion also, we have concerns about some aspects of return and of the listening to the authorities. It's not a success to close camps always in Iraq. It's not a success to deactivate the clusters in Libya, especially when it comes to the language. We are doing this because the government has lots of money or because there's a lot of oil. We will do it from a principled perspective, and the only success would be if we do it from a principled, successful perspective. And also, we cannot say that we are resorting to this solution because we don't have any other solution. This is not a solution, this is actually a problem. So I cannot re-emphasize on what Juan is mentioning, because we as the two global cluster coordinators are also noticing this trend, and we are extremely concerned about it. We think that it should be critically reviewed this responsible solution and not putting IDPs at further risks. I think now we have managed to remain within the time. I suggest the colleagues who kept the questions, choose one flip chart, write all the questions there. We will take picture and we'll put them and bring them back to the colleagues. So we will try to see how we can take them forward. Thank you very much. This was really interesting session for us. We will take a lot, and thanks for making the time. You are welcome to stay longer with us, but I understand also you have many other commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dare, and particularly thank you, Greta and Marina, for making the time for us today. We appreciate it greatly. Just one moment from me before you go to the next session. Elisa, can you go to the breakout session slide? You'll see the breakout sessions here with the rooms they're in. Just to let you know that we will continue to do simultaneous translation in this room with the headsets. And we now have Gabrielle, who will help in room 3, not simultaneous sophisticated translation with a headset, but just a helping hand from a Francophone person. And then one final question and announcement. So the question is, who in the room is from a national or local organization, i.e. not an international organization? Please put your hand up if you're from a national or local organization. You have a lunch date. You are invited to join Puiman, Caroline, and Carmen, who represent USAID, and PRM, and they will wave at you now. So Puiman, Caroline, and Carmen are representatives from the United States government donors, and they would like to have lunch with you if you come from a national or local organization. So find them at lunchtime and have a good conversation. Everyone else, please make your way to the breakout sessions. Lunch will be afterwards, and we'll see you back here at 2 o'clock.